Hey, I'm Mark. Welcome back into my studio. We are on day 3, part 3 of this Prusa MK4S build. I've got the frame sitting over here next to me on the shelf, and I actually have on my desk here the X-axis assembly that we built last time. So today we're going to work on the Z-axis, at least that's what the instructions say. I've looked ahead. It's actually the Z-axis assembly and then mounting this X-axis on there and doing some cable management with the umbilical that's going to run up to the X carriage as well. So it's more than just the Z-axis. And we're going to get started with that in a minute. I wanted to ask you guys a question, though, before we get into that. It's Christmas time, or getting close to Christmas time, as I'm recording these builds. And I'm actually kind of in a hurry with this printer because my big Voron back there, I've mentioned in the past, is currently out of commission. It's waiting for a new toolhead PCB that hasn't been released yet to replace the one that's in there that's broken. And so my only big printer is out of commission, and I have a couple things that I want to print as Christmas gifts for some family members. And they're too big to fit on my small Voron V0. So I'm hoping to get this thing built within the next several days and working so that I can use it to print some Christmas gifts. But speaking of Christmas gifts, my family gave me this shirt. I will stand up so that you can see it. It is a t-shirt that is an ugly Christmas sweater design with a Gundam on it. They gave it to me right now ahead of Christmas time because they said that they didn't think that it was, something that I would wear the rest of the year, that it was, only really applicable during this time of year to wear a shirt like this. And so they wanted me to get the opportunity to wear it before Christmas. But I wanted to ask you guys, if I were to just be walking around town and somebody saw me wearing this ugly Christmas sweater looking shirt during the rest of the year, maybe in like March or June or whatever, would that be weird? Because it's got a Gundam on it and I kind of want to wear it other times as well. So let me know down in the comments your thoughts. Is this an all year kind of shirt, or is it something that I have to save and only like wear in December, that sort of thing? Let me know. I'm curious what you guys think, because my opinion is just wear it whenever. Anyway, back to the build today. So what we've done is I've got, I think, all the parts that we're going to need. Again, these bags came nicely labeled. So there's 2 bags, one with printed parts and one with all of the hardware and looks like umbilical cable wrappings and things like that we're going to need for the build. We also need the 2 Z-axis motors, which came out of the motor kit box that came with the kit, and then these 2 Z-axis rods, which are the shortest of the rods that come out of the rod kit box. And then we've got a little PCB for the tool head as well. We'll open this up later on when we get to this part of the build. I'm just going to set it off to the side for now to keep it safe. So with all of that and then miscellaneous screws and stuff that I'm going to grab out of my little stash here that I've been using with all the sorted hardware, we'll pull those out as we need. And I'm going to go ahead and get what we need for the first couple of steps here. And again, we're on chapter 4, page 56 of the assembly PDF document, which will again be linked down in the description if you're curious, or you can just search for it on Prusa's website and find it there. So I'll be back in just a minute after I've sorted and organized parts, and we'll get started with this section of the build. Okay, so here we go. We are going to start with what they are calling the Z bottoms in the instructions here. And I've grabbed the parts we need that are listed there on that page. I have also already wiped these Z-axis rods down with a paper towel, which they suggest that we do in the instructions there as well. And so now we're going to grab this and insert it into this hole right here. And it says we might have to use like a twisting motion to get it to seat in there, which that seems fine. And it also points out that, I will try to get you a closer up view here of this, there is a little window here like we had with the X-axis rods as well, where we can look down in there and see whether the rod is inserted all the way. And it needs to be all the way flush up against the plastic part there, which it is. So now I'm going to grab the other one and do the same thing with that one, making sure again that it's seated all the way down there. All right, now we need the printer frame itself. Now this is where it's going to get a little tricky for me to show you what's going on, I think. But we'll do our best with the overhead camera here to make this work. So this one here, there's this little sort of triangular extra tab here that sticks out the outside of the printer. So I know this is the right side, and we'll get this centered under the camera so that you can see there are 3 holes here in the upright part of the metal frame that this just will screw into. So the idea is to go through these 3 holes right here with our M3x10s and screw just straight through and into that metal piece. It mentions in the instructions that we could flip this whole unit up on its back to make it a little bit easier to see and align these screws, but I got that one to go in okay. I realize that you guys can't really see anything at all on video, and I'm even having trouble seeing under there. So maybe for the second one, I'll go ahead and fasten this one down, and then for the second one, I'll try flipping the whole unit up onto its back to see if I can get you a better angle of that one. All right, so that one's all tightened down. Let's try this. There we go. All right, so these 3 holes right here are the ones I was talking about that this goes into, and maybe this will give us a better angle, both for me attaching them in and also for you watching from above through the camera. All right, so there we go. I'm gonna go ahead and set this back up in the correct orientation here. All right, up next are the Z-axis motors, which, just like the X and Y, are labeled on the bottom here. So this one says Z-axis right, the other one says Z-axis left. And again, I believe that they're the same motor, they're just different lengths of cable, right? So the right one, which is gonna go over here, needs a longer cable to be able to reach over to the electronics compartment on the opposite side of the printer. And that is the only difference between them. So I'm gonna set this one over here on my left because that is the left motor, and we'll get started with the right one first, I guess. What they want us to do is put this rubber pad down over the top. It looks like both sides are the same, so I don't think there's a difference between, you know, like the top and bottom of this rubber pad. So we'll do that, and then we will slide this up underneath. So we want the wire going toward the back of the printer. It's going to actually go under a little cutout here in the frame, and just like so. But this has to go into this opening here in our Z-axis motor mount, or Z-bottom, is that what they called it in the instructions just a minute ago? I'm going to go ahead and line both of these up just like so, and make sure that the rubber pad is on top of this one as well. And then I'm just going to lift the whole printer up and bring it down over the top, or so that these, you know, fit through those holes. Here we go. Simple enough, right? Now we'll make sure that we didn't pinch the wires. All right, that's looking good. And I guess we'll start with this one on this side. So all we need to do is lift this up. I'll support it from the bottom here with my hand, and then we're gonna screw 4 of these M3x10s down through the top here to hold the motor in place. And the instructions warn us to not tighten these completely at the moment, because we're going to probably use the tightening of them to center everything later on. All right, and since the camera angle again is not optimal, I'll kind of tilt this here so you can see these 4 silver colored screws that went in from the top here to hold that motor in place. I'm going to move over here to the one on the other side and do the same thing. All right, now it wants me to make sure that I've guided these wires correctly underneath. So there is, like I said, a little cutout in the frame, which I probably can't show you. It's too hard to see without getting a camera up underneath here. But that goes that way. And then this one goes this way, and then eventually over here toward our electronics compartment over here. And they want us to go ahead and plug them in. Interesting. All right, so I'm gonna run this under there like that. I think just leaving enough slack. I assume later on there will be a step to kind of bundle up these things with zip ties or something to hold them in place. But for now, we're going to bring both of these wires up the side here, and I will tip this up on its side so you can see. Being careful not to bend the Z-rods or put pressure on them. And so these are going to go up here and plug in to the final two things here, these two motor connectors right here on our, what is this thing called? X-Buddy board. And so it says the ZL goes on the left, which is this one here, and the ZR will go on the right, which is this one over here. Right, just like that. And I assume that these are actually going to route over this way, so that we can manage them with these cable ties that we put in place earlier. So I'm just going to, for now, kind of leave them like that. And like I said, I assume we'll clean up all of this wiring later on once we have the rest of the wiring in place. All right, up next, we need to put this X-axis onto the Z-axis rods. And so what it says to do here is we're going to use this little printed tool. We used it before for routing some zip ties, but it's also a hook, apparently, which we can hang right here in the middle of the metal part of our frame. And we should then be able to use it to hold this X-axis vertically as we, to keep it up off the ground as we work with it. So I'm going to go ahead and slide this down over so the bearings go onto these two rods. Very good. And then I'm going to use this hook to just grab it there in the middle. It does say to try to make sure that this part here is centered on the metal frame. So I'm just going to eyeball it and get it as close to centered as possible. All right, and so this is held here now, and it is causing me to not be able to see the instructions, and it's causing the camera of my face to lose focus. So yeah, this thing is way too big, probably for the camera setup that I have here, which is for building model kits. But we will press ahead and do the best that we can. So what we need to do is grab these two little nuts that go on the tops of these axes, and we need to grab 4 of the M3x10 screws, and we're going to put those down over here to hold the rods here, these screw rods, in place. But first, we need to center them, and the way we do that is we tighten these 4 screws down here on the motor. So what I'm going to do is, they suggest starting with the right hand one. I'm going to put this directly under the camera as best I can, so that you guys are looking straight down. There we go, onto this rod, right? And what I'm supposed to do is tighten these screws down here, and you should see a bit as I tighten this, it shifts to one side. So as I tighten this side, it shifted that way. If I tighten this way, it should shift back again towards the middle. And the idea here is to get this tightened down and have it so that this thing is as centered as possible in the circular opening there. So I'm going to stand up and look at it from above and work on tightening these screws, and then we're going to do the same thing on the other side to try to get these things centered as perfectly as we can. All right, so I'm happy with that first one. I'm going to move the whole thing over here so that you guys can look down on this other one, and we'll do the same thing over here. All right, and that is looking pretty good to me. So now that we've done that, we can grab these nuts and we can just screw them down here until the holes line up, and then we're going to use, it says 2 M3x10s. There are obviously 4 holes in the sides of this nut here, so we can use any 2 to screw into the 2 spots here on the top of this orange part. Make sure that's nice and snug, and then I'll move over here back to the other side, and we'll do the same thing here. All right, so with both of those now in place, we have these two little plastic pieces here that go just on the top to hold these rods up against the top metal part of the frame here. So let me make sure that we grab the correct one for this side, right? So there's a hole here for the rod to fit into, and there's a little indentation here for the screw to fit into, and it should just pop down over the top here, like so. There we go. And then there are two screw holes here that screw straight back into this metal frame, like what we've done with some of the other parts in this section of the assembly. So I'll go ahead and just put this one in place, and then the same thing on the other side. There's not really much interesting to see here, so I'll just get these in place, get everything lined up, and we will move on to the next thing. So now all that should be left to do is to manually turn these Z-axis screws, and the X carriage or the X axis lifts up, which is great. And then we can remove this hook that was holding everything in place. And yeah, looks good. I've got nice smooth motion. I'm gonna bring this down to the middle, like the vertical middle of its travel approximately, because this next step here is going to ask me to do that. All right, so that's pretty good. And then we're going to move the X carriage over as well. So this is all, if we look at it from this way, nicely centered, right? Vertically and horizontally, it's kind of centered in here. I think they just want it here so that it'll make it easy for us to be able to access everything we need to access to get the wiring and some of the rest of this X carriage work done. So I'm gonna go grab everything that we need to do that is pointed out here in the instructions, and then we'll come back and work on that next. All right, so it's time to do some wiring and cable management. I think for the rest of this part of the build, this is all we're gonna be doing, which is always a bit tedious, but important to get right? Because you don't want tangles, and you want it to be as clean and easy to both use and maintain this thing as possible, right? So what we've got here is this long umbilical wire, which is going to be the main thing that goes from our control board up to our tool head. And I think this end here with the little white tag is meant to go on the tool board side. And so this is the end over here that's going to go up here to our tool head, and they want us to pass this underneath the top of these X rods and above the belt. So we do like this, and then we grab just the straight wires, not all this bundle of wire here, and we feed that up through this cable channel. Going to be hard for probably me to show this to you on camera, but there is kind of a U-shaped cable channel here that I'm going to carefully feed these straight wires up into to tuck them nicely out of the way. There we go. And then after that, we'll do the same with this bundle of twisted wires. There we go. Probably should have got my little tweezers out to help with that part of the process, but we are now fine. Then we get this toolhead PCB. This is called the love board. It actually says that here on the silk screening on the back of the board. And there's this very nice little heart there as well. So yes, that is the toolhead PCB. And all I think we need to do right now is just plug this in here, like so. And then there's a single screw hole right there that screws into the back of this X carriage part here. And we're supposed to pull as much of the slack out as possible just to make this little bundle of wires here as small as possible so that it doesn't bump into other parts of the extruder later on. So I'm going to turn the whole assembly this way so that I can see it a little bit better. And then I'm just going to go ahead and screw this board into place. All right, and then turning this around so I can take a look back from the front here just to make sure that our slack on our wires looks good. It's not sticking over too far into this area, which is where the extruder is going to go. Yeah, I think we're good. All right, time to manage these cables. So we've got this big bundle of wires coming out the back of the X carriage here, and this is the first piece of wire management for that. So we're going to move these kind of out of the way, and I'm going to screw this plastic part into here. All right, and then they want us to take this piece of nylon, and there's a little hole kind of on the side of this that I'm supposed to put this bent end into. Just kind of press it in like that. And in an orientation so that this is curling up. This is going to be our guide for our umbilical, right? And then we're supposed to take this piece here, which will be the back of our X carriage, and there's another one of these little rectangular rubber pads like we've had in other places where we've installed bearings or installed plastic pieces around bearings. So that fits right in there. And then this is going to fit onto the back of our X carriage assembly here. But I think we need to do some wire routing first. We're supposed to grab these, route them down this way, like so. And then looking again at this bearing, remember in the last episode, we marked these bearings with a little mark from a Sharpie. And so I want that mark facing straight toward me, and then I can put this piece on the back here and screw it in place with one M3x10 at the top, and then these two M3x18s in two other holes down below here. So I'll get this secured, and then I'll show you an angle where you'll be able to see what this looks like. All right, so with that screwed down in place, this is now the back of our X carriage, right? So this is the piece that we just screwed in place. It captures that last bearing that was up here at the top, and then all of our wires are coming out nicely here, and they will go alongside of this thing, probably in some sort of a cable wrap, which I assume we're going to install next. So let me grab those. All right, so for the first bit of cable management here, they've asked me to get this cable sleeve, 2 zip ties, this little printed part here, and that should be all we need. So we are supposed to begin wrapping this around our bundle of wires. And we also want it to go around our piece of nylon here as well. I'm going to wrap that far enough up here just so that I know that the wires aren't going to escape. Yeah, that seems good enough. All right, and then these 2 zip ties are going to go down through some little channels on the outside of this printed part that we put in place earlier. Then they want me to push this sleeve as far up here as I can so that we're sure that we're capturing it with this piece that's going to fit over the top here. So this fits over the top, and then the zip ties wrap around and pull tight around this like so. And there is a little opening in this side of the piece over here for the little square head of the zip tie to sit and be out of the way. So I'm going to make sure that that goes in there, and then I'm going to pull this tight, and that looks good. And then we can go ahead and also use these to snip off the excess. All right, and now we can tuck the rest of the wire up through this cable sleeve. All right, there we go. Have I mentioned how much I hate cable management? It's satisfying when done well, but the process is not very fun. All right, another cable sleeve. Just what I needed, right? This one should be easier to feed on here. It just goes on the motor wire that's coming out of the X-axis motor. So I'll get this fed on here. So have I mentioned how much I hate doing cable management? Yeah, I know, I just did. I feel like this is going to be a recurring theme for the rest of this build, likely, because I'm sure we've got more of this still to come. All right, I'm going to declare that good enough. And we're going to move on to fitting 2 of these square nuts into the 2 slots here on this part. All right, that looks good. And then we're supposed to grab the other end of this little bent nylon piece, and we're supposed to put it in here to this hole right there. So now I'm supposed to put the extruder main cable into here, and then I'm supposed to grab the X motor cable and guide it over the top of this one so that they don't get twisted up with one another, and also run that down here into the enclosure. And I believe that that's supposed to sit in this channel here that's next to that one. So something like that. And then we have our other piece, which is going to sandwich those nicely in place. So let me just make sure that these cable sleeves are not twisted or catching on anything. Yeah, that looks good. I'm supposed to use these M3x18s through here to hold this piece together. That was actually not as bad as I feared. And one thing I realized I forgot, I've got to go grab a zip tie. There's a little channel up here for a zip tie to go around the top of this piece, so I'm going to go grab that. All right, there we go. And so now we'll run a zip tie around here. Pull it nice and tight. That looks good. I'm still seeing a little bit of the X motor wire sticking out from this sleeve, so I'm still working on pushing that fully in there. All right, that's a little better. All right, we'll trim the zip tie, and then I should be able to just fit this on here, and there are 2 screws that go down from the top straight into the metal of the enclosure that just hold this in place. All right, so that's actually looking pretty good. I think that, yeah, these cables are not going to bind up on anything or get in the way of anything. I could cut this one zip tie a little bit shorter here just to clean it up a touch more. There we go. And that's looking pretty good. Oh, and now it's time for gummy bears, which is excellent because I feel like I deserve them after that fun bit of cable management. So let me show you, if we can manage to get it in frame here, the finished Z and X axes all mounted and working, right? So we've got motion here that looks nice and smooth, and then if I turn the Z screws, we get some vertical movement of the X-axis as well. So that's all looking good. And I'm supposed to eat 6 gummy bears this time. I've got them right here. So 6 gummy bears for me. And I think we're good to go with this section. 1, 2, 3, 4. 6. 6 gummy bears. Next will be the neck extruder, which goes on here. And I'm looking forward to that because it's very different, I think, from other extruders and hot ends that I've built in the past. So we'll see what the differences are between what we build here and, you know, what normally comes on like Voron printers that I'm used to using. But that'll be next time, tomorrow. In the meantime, I'm going to eat some gummy bears, and I'm going to wish you a good day, and I'll see you in the next one.